What's going on, everybody? This is Jeff. Today we're going to talk about a looming recession. You know, the conversation that's been coming about, and we're going to dive in here about what causes a recession and indicators that would let you know if a recession was on its way, and where the United States economy is right now and the global economy, really. As we dive in here, let's go ahead and take a look at this. Many of you already know what a recession is, but basically, according to Investopedia, the National Bureau of Economic Research defines a recession as a significant decline in economic activity spread across the economy, lasting more than a few months, normally visible in a real domestic product or gross domestic product, that's GDP, real income. So this kind of stuff affects employment and, just basic commodities being purchased. And let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that are indicators of a recession, according to the Motley Fool, which I like to some extent. The unemployment rate will struggle to push lower. So right now, the unemployment rate, we're not seeing an indicator of the unemployment rate being skyrocketing, right? So that's one thing that's not exactly in favor of us heading into a recession. Okay, the yield curve is flattening. Another growing concern is flattening of the yield curve. The yield curve is nothing more than a depiction of the interest rates paid by various maturities of U.S. Treasury bonds. So you've seen this talk about bonds. You've seen the talk about interest rates. Inflation has begun picking up. A thing to consider about inflation, a lot of people, they say, "Oh, the value in my home has picked up," but we're really in just a economic channel where everything goes up 30%, but so does inflation go up 30%, so to speak. So yeah, your value in something is going up, but you're not really gaining any real value out of it. So be cautious of that because inflation has been happening. You can see it in pretty much everything. Except gas. I mean, gas prices are not as high as they were at some point around 2005, right? But you can see it in the grocery stores. You can see it in the housing market, even where prices have started to bounce back to where they were in 2005. And so we are seeing some inflation for sure. And that would make sense being that you watch two stimulus packages inject trillions of dollars into our economy, right? Where they print money out of thin air. So home sales are beginning to decline in key markets. This is something that we are actually seeing. And if I was to dial that in a little bit more, let's go ahead and take a look at the housing market. So let's see here. Oh, I've got that pulled up and we can dial that in here. Right here. So you could see the housing market actually is retracing. So it did hit a fairly high level, which we hadn't seen previously since just before 2008. But now we are starting to see new home sales, the lowest they were since 2016. So there is definitely a decline, as you can see in this chart here. And this is something that, there is an indicator that this is happening, and that kind of goes in the way of, hey, watch out. We've got some indicators here flashing. Recession is coming. Another thing that you have to keep in mind is the interest rates. So the Fed's interest rate rise was a mistake. This is coming to you from Forbes. It pains me to admit it, but for once I agree with President Trump. The Federal Reserve's decision to raise interest rates again yesterday was a mistake. So this person, Frances Coppola, she didn't want to agree with Trump, but she found herself having to, in the fact that the Fed raising the interest rates it's affecting new home purchases and home purchases in general. But this is something that you want to keep an eye on, and this has happened, and it is alarming for some people. Let's go back to the Motley Fool and look at that. Credit card debt and late payments are on the rise. Now, we don't have any data to suggest that this is necessarily happening at an alarming rate because unemployment isn't at an alarming rate, right? I mean, if we start hearing that unemployment is out of control and it's hard for people to find jobs, then this will start to come into the equation, right? This is the kind of stuff that can start happening. And if some things start toppling on top of it, job layoffs happen, right? So, a lot of people don't like the idea that trickle-down economics even exists, which basically means if the rich are wealthy, then they're hiring. If the rich are paranoid, they're not going to be hiring, right? So the rich are the ones who own the businesses in capitalism, right? The economic cycle suggests a contraction. So we've seen this where, we were reaching all-time highs in the stock market. Tech stocks were booming. Amazon was booming. Google wasn't really booming compared to Amazon. Apple was booming, went over $1 trillion market cap, and we did see some crazy growth occurring with that. And if we go here to the Market Watch, this is the New York Stock Exchange, and we come over here and we just look at the 3-year, you could see we did have a serious drop in stocks around the first of the year here. The U.S. stock market was really surging, and then it peeled back, and that lasted until about March, and then it kind of climbed back up again. And this doesn't indicate anything. This isn't an outstandingly unusual graph, obviously. But there is a drop, and we've recovered from this before. This is not like cryptocurrency, where once you start heading down, you're going down, and when you start heading up, you're going to the moon kind of thing. It's got a lot less volatility, although we are seeing some volatility here in 2018. And, if you take this back, you can go all the way to 2003. You can see the real collapse there, which this pales in comparison to that. And if any time there would have been cause for concern, it would have been in 2015. It could have looked kind of ominous, and in 2011 it could have looked kind of ominous, and we haven't seen it head in that direction according to the New York Stock Exchange. Now, you are seeing some a lot of press here where they are talking about signs to look out for the recession. And another thing to keep in mind, because it's not all about the United States, right? We've also got some issues popping up in Italy, where they're saying France and Germany are hell-bent on destroying Italian economy. Economist warns there is some serious trouble happening in Italy's economy. And what some economic forecasters are saying, if the Italian economy collapses, because it is much more powerful, so to speak, than Greece, an Italian economic collapse or a real downfall in Italy, that would be a lot worse than what we saw in Greece. And if you guys flash back, you remember the Greece economic collapse was quite devastating, really, to the EU. And Germany again came in and saved the day. But they're claiming that Germany and France are kind of pushing that. Okay. And then I wanted to talk about another thing that I think is really important to keep an eye on here. And that is the U.S.-China trade war that's been brewing. They're feeling it here at home with the soybean farmers, with the tariffs. And it's hard for these soybean farmers who obviously had a big imprint in China with soybeans. They're feeling it, okay? And it's not just soybeans, but I'm sure China is also feeling it. And a trade war can get really nasty, especially if there's not a lot of concession on either side. And one of the interesting things to keep in mind here that I'm observing is this China and Japan are kind of coming together here. And that would indicate, now, usually the United States kind of leans on a destabilization of Asia. The United States likes the fact that Japan and China don't really like each other, because that means they've got to pick one side and be big brother to another side. And what's happening here is China and Japan are kind of becoming friendly. And that's a really good thing for Asia. But, even that would be unsustainable for Asia, because they could be pals today and then all of a sudden enter into an arms conflict at a later date. And we've seen that with, let's just say, the United States and Russia pre-Cold War era, where the United States and Russia were both aligned to help defeat the Axis powers, the Axis of evil, as some people call them, the Central Powers, Germany and their war machine, United States and Russia were both fighting Germany at the same time, kind of friends. And then after that was done, then it was like, okay, now we're going to fight each other for who's going to be number one. And that same kind of situation would happen more than likely in Japan and China, because there's wounds here that have not healed. But the fact that the United States is so deeply entrenched in the trade war, or the trade war with China, that is something to keep an eye on. Okay, so I wanted to go over all this. If you guys are new here to JJ Talks, you guys can subscribe. We do have open dialogue. We talk about a whole wide variety of subjects, including whatever's on the table. If you guys have any ideas about videos you'd like me to talk about, but this just came up, and I'll see you guys next time. And that'll do it for now. Subscribe to this channel if you like.